Charles Darwin was a naturalist and geologist. His father and mother are doctors. He was pushed to Edinburgh Medical School to pursue a doctorate by his father. His lack of interest in medicine led his father to enroll him for a BA. He chose his primary interest in botany and earned a distinction. Darwin spent 5 years discovering species around the world on the HMS Beagle, a naval survey ship. He was there to collect animal and bird specimens from the country and the island. Visiting the Galapagos Islands changed his whole life and gave him a purpose. After returning to his place, he began to study the various species collected around the world in detail. He discovered that finches all over the world are the same, but birds from different islands have different species. He began to study many animals and birds and came up with the theory of natural selection. His theory was rejected while he was still alive, but today it was accepted and the theory became the basis of genetics. He has received awards such as the Copley Medal, the Kingdom Medal, and more. Today we have collected quotes from the legend of Charles Darwin that will conspire and inspire you, covering topics such as life, education, time, change, and joy. Man, wonderful man, must collapse into nature's cauldron. He is no deity. He is no exception. The mystery of the beginning of all things is insoluble by us, and I for one must be content to remain an agnostic. We must, however, acknowledge, as it seems to me, that man with all his noble qualities still bears in his bodily frame the indelible stamp of his lowly origin. A fair result can be obtained only by fully stating and balancing the facts and arguments on both sides of each question. Blushing is the most peculiar and most human of all expressions. False facts are highly injurious to the progress of science, for they often endure long, but false views, if supported by some evidence, do little harm, for everyone takes a salutary pleasure in proving their falseness. Besides love and sympathy, animals exhibit other qualities connected with the social instincts, which in us would be called moral. Even people who aren't geniuses can outthink the rest of mankind if they develop certain thinking habits. The more one thinks, the more one feels the hopeless immensity of man's ignorance. Freedom of thought is best promoted by the gradual illumination of men's minds, which follows from the advance of science. We stopped looking for monsters under our bed when we realized that they were inside us. The power to charm the female has sometimes been more important than the power to conquer other males in battle. A scientific man ought to have no wishes, no affections, a mere heart of stone. The very essence of instinct is that it's followed independently of reason. Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. It is those who know little, not those who know much, who so positively assert that this or that problem will never be solved by science. If the misery of the poor be caused not by the laws of nature, but by our institutions, great is our sin. A republic cannot succeed till it contains a certain body of men imbued with the principles of justice and honor. One general law leading to the advancement of all organic beings, namely, multiply, vary, let the strongest live and the weakest die. The love for all living creatures is the most noble attribute of man. I am turned into a sort of machine for observing facts and grinding out conclusions. An American monkey, after getting drunk on brandy, would never touch it again, and thus is much wiser than most men. Man tends to increase at a greater rate than his means of subsistence. The world will not be inherited by the strongest. It will be inherited by those most able to change. To kill an error is as good a service as, and sometimes even better than, the establishing of a new truth or fact. In the struggle for survival, the fittest win out at the expense of their rivals because they succeed in adapting themselves best to their environment. In conclusion, it appears that nothing can be more improving to a young naturalist than a journey in distant countries. The most powerful natural species are those that adapt to environmental change without losing their fundamental identity, which gives them their competitive advantage. We are always slow in admitting any great change of which we do not see the intermediate steps. Evolution is written on the wings of butterflies. The highest possible stage in moral culture is when we recognize that we ought to control our thoughts. Intelligence is based on how efficient a species became at doing the things they need to survive. In the long history of humankind and animal kind, to those who learn it to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed. Some call it evolution, and others call it God. At some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. The fact of evolution is the backbone of biology, and biology is thus in the peculiar position of being a science founded on an improved theory. Is it then a science or faith? If I had my life to live over again, I would have made a rule to read some poetry and listen to some music at least once every week. I have called this principle by which each slight variation, if useful, is preserved by the term of natural selection. Keep steadily in mind that each organic being is striving to increase, that each at some period of its life has the struggle for life and suffer great destruction. A man who dares to waste 1 hour of time has not discovered the value of life. Natural selection almost inevitably causes much extinction of the less improved forms of life and induces what I have called divergence of character. We are not here concerned with hopes or fears, only with truth as far as our reason permits us to discover it. Nothing exists for itself alone, but only in relation to other forms of life. There is no fundamental difference between man and animals in their ability to feel pleasure and pain, happiness and misery. But a plant on the edge of a desert is said to struggle for life against a drought, though more properly should be said to be dependent upon the moisture. We can allow satellites, planets, suns, universe, nay whole systems of universes to be governed by laws, but the smallest insect we wish to be created at once by special act. It is no valid objection that science as yet throws no light on the far higher problem of the essence or origin of life. Who can explain what is the essence of the attraction of gravity? There is grandeur in this view of life with its several powers, having been originally breathed by the Creator into a few forms or into one. Sexual selection acts in a less rigorous manner than natural selection. The latter produces its effects by the life or death at all ages of the more or less successful individuals. And thus, the forms of life throughout the universe become divided into groups subordinate to groups. Light will be thrown on the origin of man and his history. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like our videos.